Carl Jung once revealed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In those few words lies the key to one of the most sacred yet misunderstood aspects of human experience: intimacy. Not just the act, but the energetic convergence that occurs when two souls come close enough to touch what's hidden within themselves and within one another. Have you ever left someone's presence not just changed, but subtly fragmented, as though something intangible had been exchanged, something you didn't consciously agree to give away? We often think of intimacy in terms of closeness, affection, or desire. But beneath the surface, there's a quiet transmission happening, the merging of emotional imprints, energetic vibrations, and ancestral echoes that neither party may fully understand. To Jung, the unconscious wasn't just a personal vault, it was collective, archetypal, and deeply interconnected. When two people meet in vulnerability, especially through the sacred threshold of physical union, what passes between them isn't just skin and breath. It is story, wound, shadow, energy. These things cling and imprint themselves not on the body but on the soul. The modern world encourages casualness. It sells the illusion that we can part from someone the morning after, as easily as we remove clothing. But what if that's not true? What if every encounter leaves a residue, a subtle fingerprint on your psyche? What if the real weight you're carrying is not from stress, but from fragments of people you never fully let go of? Jung spoke often of projections, the ways we see others as reflections of our inner world. Intimacy magnifies this. In that sacred convergence, we not only see ourselves more clearly, but absorb unspoken parts of the other, their longings, their fears, their unfinished emotional scripts. And we carry these pieces without realizing it, like ghosts hitching a ride in our energetic field. Have you ever met someone and felt simultaneously drawn to them and drained by them? That's no accident, it's resonance. Sometimes we don't fall for a person, we fall into their emotional atmosphere, we step into their psychic house, unaware that our own walls begin to crumble in their presence. And sometimes we don't even notice until we've left with less of ourselves than we arrived with. In many esoteric traditions, sexual energy is revered, not merely for its role in creation, but for its power to transform or fragment the self. It is the raw material of manifestation, the energy of becoming. When shared with reverence, it refines and expands the soul, but when exchanged unconsciously, it leaks, it stains, it siphons vitality in ways no logic can explain. Jung saw human connection as a mirror of the individuation process, the path of integrating what is hidden into the light of consciousness. Intimacy is a portal on this path, and what we do with it either accelerates or halts our evolution. When approached blindly, it entangles us in karmic cycles we can't escape. When approached with presence, it becomes sacred alchemy. And so the question arises, what are we really doing when we connect with another at that level? Are we uniting, or are we scattering ourselves across bodies and timelines we don't belong to? If you've ever left a relationship feeling inexplicably hollow or strangely altered, that was not your imagination. That was energy rearranging itself. To enter intimacy with unconscious intent is to open the gates of your soul without guarding what comes in or what leaves. But to meet another with awareness, with spiritual reverence, is to commune not just in flesh, but in frequency. The consequences of one path echo in emotional fatigue, the gifts of the other radiate as inner peace. And it all begins with what Jung urged us to explore, the shadow within. There's a quiet erosion that happens when we mistake intimacy for fulfillment. You may not feel it immediately. In fact, it often arrives in silence, like mist settling over a landscape you thought was clear. After the closeness fades, after the voice is no longer near, There's a weight that wasn't there before, a heaviness that presses down not on your shoulders but on your spirit. Carl Jung would say this is the cost of an unconscious bond, not simply that we shared space with another, but that we failed to recognize what was exchanged. Intimacy, when lived without intention, becomes a portal through which our vitality can slowly leak. Not because the act itself is wrong, but because the energy we absorb has no place to rest within us. Their pain, their insecurities, their unmet needs begin to hum beneath our own thoughts. And we confuse this hum for exhaustion, for mood swings, for a mysterious sadness that clings to the edges of our joy. But what we're feeling is the residue of someone else's shadow. We don't often speak of intimacy as a spiritual contract, but that's exactly what it becomes when two people merge energetically. We carry pieces of them, just as they carry pieces of us. And unless those pieces are returned, unless the door is closed with awareness, the bond remains active. This is why some people stay with us long after they've left. Not because they were unforgettable, but because we forgot to release what was never fully ours. Have you ever found yourself haunted by a memory that shouldn't have meant much? A casual moment, a name you barely whispered, and yet, days later, their voice echoes inside your chest. This is not obsession, it is energetic imprint, and the more unaware we are during these moments of merging, the more porous we become. We absorb without filters. We hold what was never ours to hold. Jung often spoke of psychic fragments, unconscious splinters of memory or emotion that split from the self and operate with autonomy. In intimacy, these fragments multiply. We may unknowingly internalize someone else's guilt, their shame, even their self-doubt. And suddenly, we're making choices from feelings that don't originate in us. Our path gets foggy, our motivation thins, our clarity dims, and we don't know why. It's not uncommon to feel an inexplicable drop in energy after an encounter that seemed harmless. It might even feel pleasurable in the moment. But afterward, something is missing. This is not just a psychological response, it's a spiritual one, because where there is no balance, no sacred exchange, intimacy becomes a transaction where one gives and the other quietly takes. Many people chase connection, hoping to feel whole. But the truth is, no amount of bodies can fill a spiritual absence. When intimacy is used to numb, to escape, to validate, it leaves us emptier than before, because we are not healing, we are leaking. The more we give away our essence without awareness, the more we lose sight of what it means to be grounded in our own energy. Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt like a stranger to yourself, not because you've changed, but because too many others have left their reflection on your face? That feeling is real. It's what happens when you've allowed too many unresolved energies to sit at the table of your spirit, and every day they whisper their stories into your mind until you no longer know which voice is yours. But the most dangerous part of unconscious intimacy isn't just what it takes, it's what it teaches. It conditions us to believe that disconnection is normal, that feeling drained is a cost we must pay for closeness, that something always has to be lost in order for desire to be felt. This is a lie of the shadow, and the more we believe it, the further we drift from ourselves. Jung believed that awareness was the foundation of freedom. To reclaim our energy, we must first admit where we've given it away. We must step back from the noise and examine each bond, not by what was said, but by how we felt afterward. Did we rise, or did we shrink? Did the connection add to our life, or quietly hollow us out? These are the questions that begin to heal. There is a truth the soul understands long before the intellect does. Not all intimacy is nourishing. Some touches leave bruises, not on the skin, but on the spirit. You may smile, you may say it was nothing, but the body, your oldest witness, knows. It stores what the conscious mind dismisses. It carries the imprint of every moment that entered you without your full permission or awareness. Carl Jung taught that the body is not separate from the psyche, but a reflection of it. What you feel somatically is often a message from the unconscious, a whisper rising from deep within, asking to be heard. And when it comes to intimacy, these whispers grow louder with time. A sudden fatigue, an unexplainable tension, a hollow sensation after pleasure. These are not coincidences, these are signals. Intimacy, especially when experienced without emotional resonance, often leaves behind echoes, not only of the person, but of the energy they carried into the encounter, their fears, their unfinished grief, their self-loathing. You think you've left them in the past, but fragments of their inner world may have settled into yours, and unless brought into the light of consciousness, they begin to color your thoughts, your mood, your direction. This is how energetic residue turns into emotional weight. You may find yourself doubting your worth after certain encounters, questioning your instincts, second-guessing your desires. It isn't always about what they said or did. Often it's about what they unconsciously transferred. The momentary merging opened a psychic channel, and now you carry what was never yours to bear. Jung described complexes as autonomous energies within the psyche, alive, reactive, and rooted in past experience. When intimacy awakens these complexes without resolution, they don't fade, they evolve. They start steering your decisions from behind the scenes. You find yourself repeating relationship patterns, attracted to the same emotional wound in different bodies, stuck, yet unaware of what holds you. Have you ever ended a relationship and felt like a part of you remained with that person, even when you wanted to move on? That sensation is not drama, it's entanglement. It's the consequence of sharing your energy without anchoring it in self-awareness. And the longer the bond is left unhealed, the more deeply it entwines with your own inner narrative, rewriting pieces of your story. Some people describe a strange fog that settles over them after certain relationships. Their creativity vanishes, their motivation dips, they feel disconnected from their purpose. This is not depression, it's energetic disorientation. You've scattered yourself across too many places without ever calling your pieces back home. You've poured yourself into vessels that weren't strong enough to hold you. But here lies the hope. Nothing is truly lost. What has been given can be reclaimed. Jung believed that the psyche, when given space and awareness, naturally moves toward wholeness. Integration is not about erasing the past. It's about retrieving the energy that was frozen in it. It's about turning wounds into wisdom and exchanges into insight. To begin, you must listen, not to what others say, but to what your inner world has been trying to express. The fatigue, the longing, the confusion, these are doorways, not enemies. They are invitations to return to yourself, to retrieve what you once gave away without knowing its cost, and through that return, you begin to remember your original shape. True healing starts when you no longer see intimacy as something casual, but as something sacred, as a meeting of worlds, as a potential ritual. Not every connection deserves access to your energy, not because others are unworthy, but because your essence is holy, and to offer it without intention is to forget the depth of your own soul. There comes a moment, often quiet and unremarkable, when we realize that not every touch is equal. Some embrace you and leave you fuller, like sunlight filling a cold room. Others graze your skin and steal something intangible, a lightness you didn't notice you had until it vanished. This is the power of intention, an invisible force that shapes the energy of every encounter, especially those we call intimate. Carl Jung often returned to the idea that what remains unconscious governs us from the shadows, and in the realm of intimacy, intention is the bridge between the unconscious and the awakened self. When we engage with others without clarity of purpose, We open ourselves to energies we are not prepared to carry. We become vessels filled by experiences we didn't choose consciously, yet must live with fully. So many enter relationships seeking relief from loneliness, escape from pain, or distraction from fear. And while these desires are deeply human, when they are unmet within the self, they become needs projected onto others. This projection creates imbalance. One gives hoping to be filled, the other takes without knowing they were asked to heal a wound they did not create. Neither leaves whole. Intimacy experienced without awareness becomes a silent transaction. Life force exchanged for momentary validation. And the price is always higher than we expect. Energy given in unconscious desire rarely returns in the form we hoped for. Instead, it returns as heaviness, as confusion, as a series of questions we can't quite answer. Why do I feel so lost? Why do I miss them when they made me feel small? But when intention is present, when intimacy is rooted in truth, mutual respect, and emotional clarity, the energy shared becomes transformative. It doesn't drain, it expands, it strengthens the self, not because it completes us, but because it reflects back the wholeness we already carried within. In such moments, intimacy becomes a spiritual act, a communion between two beings, walking toward integration. Jung's idea of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, is beautifully reflected in how we relate to others. Every conscious connection becomes a mirror, showing us where we are healed and where we still fragment. But unconscious connection, that shows us nothing but the repetition of pain. Until we awaken, we repeat. Until we set intention, we react. Have you noticed how some relationships begin with fire and end with ashes, while others unfold slowly, yet leave you glowing? The difference is not in chemistry, it's in presence, in awareness, in how much of ourselves we actually bring to the moment. If you show up wearing a mask, the intimacy you receive will be shaped by illusion. If you show up fully, the experience becomes real, regardless of its length. But here's the truth most avoid. Intention requires vulnerability. It asks you to admit what you want, to risk being misunderstood, to say, "This is what I seek, not to fix me but to meet me." And that level of honesty scares many, so they choose disconnection disguised as pleasure, not realizing that every time they do, they drift further from their own center. The soul, however, always remembers, even if the mind forgets. And one day, whether in stillness or in sorrow, it begins to ask for alignment. It pulls you away from shallow bonds and toward sacred ones. It nudges you to pause before merging, to ask, is this an exchange or an escape? This is the beginning of reclaiming your energy. The start of intimacy not as habit, but as intention. Because ultimately, intimacy is never neutral. It either awakens you or fragments you. And only intention can tell the difference. Not the words they say, nor the thrill you feel, but the quiet knowing in your body after they've left. Does it feel like home, or does it feel like something inside you has wandered too far? There are moments when we look at our life and can't explain the fog. Projects stall, focus slips. The joy we once felt becomes dulled, like music playing behind a closed door. And yet, nothing external has changed. That's when the soul begins to whisper, something within has been dispersed. Something sacred has been handed over without your full awareness. Carl Jung spoke of the unseen structures that guide our behavior, archetypes, complexes, the unconscious, but he also spoke of inheritance, not just of biology, but of energy, memory, and wound. What we absorb from others, especially through intimate encounters, does not vanish when they do. Their fears can take root in us. Their unfinished grief can echo in our chest. Their anger subtly becomes our restlessness. Have you ever noticed how a season of confusion followed a relationship that was supposed to be brief? How you began questioning your purpose, your worth, your place in the world, not because of what was said, but because of how you felt after they left. These aren't just emotional remnants, they're energetic debts. And you're the one still paying them. We tend to assume that when a relationship ends, so does its influence. But energy doesn't obey the rules of time. What was never consciously released remains within us, stored in muscle, in mood, in the silent architecture of the psyche. You might walk away physically, but the imprint walks beside you, shaping how you speak to yourself, how you trust others, how you dream. And the cost is not always immediate. Sometimes it shows up weeks later, disguised as apathy, as a lack of vision, as a quiet disconnection from your own soul. And because we don't see a direct cause, we blame ourselves. We call it laziness or depression. We try to fix it with productivity, but none of that heals what was taken unconsciously. Only awareness can. Intimacy without integration scatters us. And in a world addicted to fast connections, this scattering becomes a norm we forget to question. We begin to believe that love is always followed by confusion, that desire always brings depletion, that no matter how hard we try, we always end up lost in someone else's story. But this isn't love, it's an energetic entanglement, masquerading as connection. Jung believed the psyche naturally seeks wholeness. When you begin to feel fragmented, it's a call inward, not to isolate, but to retrieve. To ask, what part of me did I give away there? What emotion am I carrying that doesn't belong to me? Who am I still holding inside my nervous system, even though they haven't spoken my name in months? The truth is, some of your fatigue isn't yours. Some of your guilt isn't yours. Some of your guilt isn't yours. Some of your scarcity, your fear of love, your hesitation to trust, it's all inherited through energetic osmosis, through connections that entered you not just physically, but spiritually. And unless you name these imprints, they continue to live inside you, influencing how you walk forward. But you are not powerless here. You can reclaim what was scattered. You can call your energy back, not by cutting people off out of anger or suppressing your desire, but by choosing to become fully present again, by seeing yourself not as someone broken, but as someone awakening, as someone finally recognizing the sacredness of their own life force. When that recognition arrives, something beautiful happens. The debts begin to dissolve. The voice in your head becomes your own again. You stop living through the lens of another's energy, and in that clarity you feel it, your power, returning, not as noise, but as peace. As the quiet certainty that you no longer owe yourself to anyone who cannot hold you with reverence. There is a silence more profound than stillness. It's the silence we return to after giving too much of ourselves away, not just in words or time, but in essence, that moment when the distractions fade and you're left with the truth. You've been emptied not by life, but by the unconscious giving of yourself to those who could not receive you fully. Carl Jung often emphasized that healing is not about fixing what is broken, but recovering what was lost. And when it comes intimacy, what we lose is rarely visible. It's not the memory of someone's touch that haunts us. It's the way we stopped hearing our own thoughts afterward, the way our desires became confused, the way our reflection felt unfamiliar, though our body had not changed. Too often we enter intimacy searching for something we've forgotten how to give ourselves: validation, presence, meaning. And though the encounter may feel electric, what follows is rarely clarity. Instead, there's a drifting, an internal fog, where our boundaries blur and our sense of direction fades. This is the cost of seeking wholeness in someone else's body. But the soul has its own intelligence. It knows when you've wandered too far, and it will call you back first with restlessness, then with pain, and finally with truth. That truth may come through tears, or in a quiet realization, I've been pouring into others to avoid filling myself. This is not failure, it is awakening. Jung taught that individuation, the journey to the true self, requires withdrawal from false identities. And what are most casual relationships if not rehearsals of identity? We become who we think they want. We offer fragments of truth, dressed in the costume of desire, and later we wonder why it all feels so hollow. The answer is simple: you cannot be fed while wearing a mask. True intimacy begins the moment you remove that mask, not for someone else but for yourself. When you sit with your own hunger and ask, what am I really needing? The answer is rarely sex. It is usually safety, reflection, recognition. And no matter how many people you reach for, you will not feel full until you give those things to yourself first. Have you ever noticed how powerful you feel when you are alone and aligned? How decisions become easier, emotions clearer, and your body lighter? That is your natural state. That is your undivided energy, returning to its source. You don't have to isolate forever to reclaim this. But you do have to choose carefully who enters your sacred space. Because every encounter is a contract. Every moment of vulnerability is an opening. And when we stop treating our energy as disposable, we begin to meet others not from hunger, but from wholeness. And the difference is profound. One connection drains. The other expands. One leaves us questioning ourselves. The other makes us more ourselves than before. You are not here to scatter. You are here to integrate, to bring home every piece of yourself left behind in shallow moments and hollow bonds. And with each piece you return, you step more fully into the self Jung spoke of, the self that is whole, radiant, and free from the shadows of forgotten exchanges. There's a moment in every healing journey when we stop blaming others and start listening inward, not out of resignation but out of maturity. We realize the pattern isn't in them, it's in us. The recurring confusion, the post-intimacy emptiness, the sense of being lost after being close, and it begins to make sense. We weren't choosing from our fullness, we were choosing from our fragmentation. Carl Jung often spoke of projection as a mirror for the unconscious. In intimacy, this mirror becomes magnified. What we fear, what we long for, what we deny within ourselves, it all surfaces in the presence of another, not because they create it, but because they activate it. Every lover is a mirror, and every encounter a reflection of what we are still learning to love or accept about ourselves. This is why some connections feel like home, while others feel like haunting. The person isn't always the difference. It's who we are in their presence. If we feel safe, seen, calm, it's often because we've reached a place within where we can hold ourselves that way. But if we feel unsure, depleted, or dependent, it's a sign we've touched a wound, not a truth. And this is the medicine hiding inside every energetic exchange. The opportunity to witness ourselves clearly, to see what we attract and why. To understand not just who we desire, but who we become when we desire. Do we lose ourselves in their attention? Do we bend to be chosen? Do we silence our intuition for the sake of not being alone? These questions are not meant to shame. They are meant to reveal, because awareness is the gateway to transformation. And when you begin to observe yourself through this lens, something profound happens. The people you once chased no longer interest you. The patterns you once repeated begin to dissolve, not because you forced them away, but because you've outgrown the energy that once called them in. Jung taught that transformation doesn't come through suppression. It comes through integration. You don't need to erase the past to move forward. You need to reabsorb the part of yourself you gave away in the name of connection. You need to sit with the ache, not as punishment, but as instruction. Let it tell you what part of you was longing to be met. This is where intimacy evolves into a sacred act, no longer a place of escape or performance, but a realm of truth. You begin to ask not, how do I impress them, but can I remain myself in their presence? And when you can, you've found alignment. When you can't, the connection may not be for you, no matter how thrilling the surface feels. But here's the paradox. The more whole you become, the more selective you grow, not out of superiority but out of reverence. You realize not everyone can hold the version of you that no longer leaks, that no longer entertains chaos, that no longer aches for validation. And while this can feel lonely, it's the birthplace of a different kind of love, one that expands instead of empties. You are not difficult for wanting intentional connection. You are not too much for needing your energy to be honored. You are simply awakening, and with that awakening comes discernment, the inner knowing that your body, your spirit, your truth are not playgrounds, they are temples, and only those who come with devotion are meant to enter. As you begin to reclaim the scattered pieces of yourself, something subtle but extraordinary begins to shift. You no longer rush to fill silence with someone else's voice. You no longer reach for connection out of fear. You realize that emptiness isn't always something to escape. It's often the sacred space where healing begins. Carl Jung called this the withdrawal of projection. The moment when you stop expecting the outer world to complete what only the inner world can resolve. You start to feel the difference between energy that nourishes and energy that confuses. You begin to trust the signals your body has been sending all along, the knot in your stomach, the fog in your mind, the subtle fatigue after what was supposed to be pleasure. These aren't signs of weakness, they are messages. Messages from your unconscious trying to restore you to yourself. This is the power of integration, not simply understanding what happened in the past, but taking back what you left there, the laughter you stifled, the truth you swallowed, the energy you poured into someone who wasn't ready to receive it. None of it was wasted. It is waiting for you right where you lost it, and you do not need closure from another to return. You only need awareness and intention. So many believe they must cut cords, burn bridges, or erase memory to be free. But real freedom is not in forgetting, it's in remembering who you were before the entanglement began. It's in standing still, letting the energy come back to you, and saying, "This is mine, this was always mine." That act alone begins to shift the tide. Intimacy, then, becomes something entirely different. No longer a transaction, no longer a means of escape. It becomes a conscious offering, a space where two people exchange without losing themselves, where each walks away, not diminished, but expanded, where the encounter leaves no confusion, only clarity, no guilt, only gratitude, no depletion, only peace. But to reach this space, you must cross a bridge of discomfort. You must face the truth of your past choices, not to punish yourself, but to understand them. You must ask, where was I when I said yes to what I didn't want? Who was I when I mistook chaos for passion? What part of me believed that emptiness was the price of love? These are hard questions, but they are holy. They lead you not to blame, but to sovereignty. And when you stop avoiding them, you stop repeating the cycle. Suddenly you are no longer attracting people who mirror your fragmentation. You begin calling in those who resonate with your integration. And this is the great reversal. The more you belong to yourself, the more you meet others who do too. Carl Jung believed that wholeness was not perfection, it was the union of opposites. Your light and your shadow, your strength and your softness, your longing and your limits. In conscious intimacy, all of these parts are welcome. Nothing is hidden, nothing is denied, and in that space, something sacred awakens, the truth that you can love and still remain whole. You are no longer here to bleed for love, you are here to embody it. Not the love that drains or demands, but the love that reflects your highest self back to you. And if that sounds rare, it's because it is. But it becomes possible the moment you decide that your energy is not up for compromise, that your essence is not a gift for the unready. By the time you reach this place where your energy has returned, your mind has cleared, and your spirit stands whole, you begin to view intimacy not as risk, but as revelation. It no longer threatens your identity, it enhances it, because now you no longer enter as a seeker of completion. You enter as someone already complete, and what you share is not a request for rescue, it is a gift of presence. Carl Jung spoke of the union of opposites, not just as an inner integration, but as the deepest path toward love itself. When two people come together from that place, not in lack, but in fullness, they do not fuse to survive. They mirror to expand, they become catalysts, not crutches, and in that dynamic, intimacy becomes what it was always meant to be: sacred. You will feel it in your nervous system first. Peace instead of anxiety, curiosity instead of fear. A sense of being deeply seen, not because someone decoded you, but because you're no longer hiding. This is the fruit of your inner work, the moment when intimacy stops being a performance and becomes a prayer, where pleasure and presence are no longer in conflict, they are one. But this kind of connection demands discernment. It asks you to notice who drains you, even when they speak in softness, who inspires you, even in silence, who leaves you heavier, and who helps you remember your own light. You begin to listen, not with your ears, but with your energy, and the body, now reclaimed, becomes your compass. There may still be temptations, still be longing for the old chaos that once felt like love. That's normal, the psyche clings to familiarity. But your soul knows the difference now. It knows that love is not proven in suffering, that depth doesn't require damage, that real intimacy doesn't blur your vision, it sharpens it, doesn't scatter your essence, it anchors it. This is the alchemy of conscious union, where sex is no longer just release, but creation, where desire is no longer escape, but expression, where energy flows in mutual reverence, not manipulation, and what once left you empty now leaves you full. What once confused you now makes you more yourself. This is the healing you were always worthy of. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that includes who you are in the arms of another." If your essence is sacred, then the way you share it must be too. You begin to choose slowly, carefully, not out of fear, but out of deep knowing. You no longer ask, "Will they love me?" Instead, you ask, "Can I remain whole with them?" The difference is everything. Because now you protect your peace like a sacred garden. You welcome love, not because you need it to survive, but because it reflects your growth, and in this place, intimacy becomes the continuation of your healing, not the pause of it, the amplification of your power, not the surrender of it. So, if you've walked through the valley of confusion, of energetic depletion, of restless desire, know this: you can return, you can reclaim, you can realign. And from that wholeness, you can build something rare. A connection where energy is not taken but exchanged, where the soul is not dimmed but awakened, where love is not a wound but a mirror. You have always had the power to choose how you share your essence. And now you know, intimacy, when lived with presence, becomes your portal, not into someone else's world, but back into your own. Welcome home.